Hey everybody, welcome to the Amonkhet spoiler recap for April 5th on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and we've got a bunch today, but not quite as many as yesterday. I imagine things will trickle down the rest of this week, and then we'll get another big batch on Monday. Up first, we have Scarab Feast. This one's at least a little less gross than the Scarab Nest or the Nest of Scarabs. Scarab Feast is a single black mana for an instant at common. Exile up to 3 target cards from a single graveyard. So you can't sort this between yours and your opponent's, etc., or 2 different opponents. It has to be 1 graveyard up to 3. You can also cycle it for a single black. Now this, I believe, is a sideboard card in Limited, if you're up against a heavy embalm or something like that. I mean, it's a sideboard card anywhere, really. But I have a feeling people are going to start playing this in their main deck in Limited, because, hey, this is a graveyard set, and I need to remove stuff from my opponent's graveyard. The stars are going to have to align basically perfectly for you to really get somebody with this, because of course if they're recurring in some way, they can probably do it at instant speed. If they're casting a sorcery or if they're embalming, it's too late for you to cast this. Once they do it, it's gone. Yeah, I don't think this is a main deck card in Limited, but it has huge implications for constructed sideboards for sure. Floodwaters is up next. Floodwaters is 4 blue for a sorcery at common. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hand. Cycling 2. This is really expensive, but the effect is fine, and if you do have it early, it's not the worst thing to just throw it away. Reminds me an awful lot of Sea God's Revenge from Theros, although that was cheaper, easier to cast, returned 3, and had a scry. So not nearly as good as Sea God's Revenge, which was good. So I'm not holding out hope for this one. We got a peek tonight as well at Colossapede. Colossapede is 4 and a green for a creature insect at common. It's a 5/5. It's a 5/5 for 5 for green. Green is getting more amazing stuff. What abilities does it have? Nothing. It's just a 5/5 for 5. It's no biggie. It's just a vanilla creature. It has keyword big, as Limited Resources would say. Yeah, this is the point where the vanilla test starts to break down a little bit. You know, if you get a 7/7 for 7, it's not really that good, whereas a 2/2 for 2 is often great. So 5/5 for 5, not much to say here. It's 23rd card. We saw a little bit more green commons with Pouncing Cheetah. Pouncing Cheetah is 2 and a green for a creature cat at common. It's a 3/2, and it has Flash, which is a pretty darn good ability. You know, our 3/2s for 3 often have nothing attached to them. Sometimes they might have Menace or something if they're in red or black, but Flash is actually pretty good. This will do a pretty darn decent impersonation of an Ambush Viper. It's lacking the death touch that Ambush Viper has, but 3 will catch an awful lot of things. So I'm going to keep my eye on Pouncing Cheetah. I'm going to bet it's going to be a pretty, not necessarily premium on common, but it's going to be a pretty darn good common for sure. Painful Lesson is up next. It's 2 and a black for a sorcery at common. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. This is basically Sign in Blood. Sign in Blood was black. Everything I just said. This is 2 and a black, so it's slightly easier to cast, even though it costs 1 more. So in my mind, it kind of costs like half a mana more, sort of. Yeah, I love Sign in Blood, and it's a true Sign in Blood because it can hit your opponent. If your opponent's at 2 life, this is a 3 mana shock, and it can just kill them off. I love formats where Sign in Blood is playable, and if this is playable, and if this doesn't just, you know, end up being draft chaff and last pick, I'm going to be pretty happy with this set, I think. Now today, the rest of the cartouches that we talked about on, I believe, Monday were revealed. The first one, the blue one, Cartouche of Knowledge, is 1 and a blue for an enchantment or a cartouche at common. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Knowledge enters the battlefield, draw a card. It flat out replaces itself. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. Now, all of these cartouches, as we're going to see, are shockingly playable for auras because they're generally cheap. +1/+1 and an ability is typically good as long as the ability is decent. We'll see a couple where I'm less confident in them. And a lot of them replace themselves in some way. So this draws you a card. It's not a free card. Don't get on that train. But it does replace itself. I'm going to be just all over these cartouches to start with. I have a feeling some people who are really stuck into auras are bad might not play them, and they might have to learn something here. Our second cartouche is Cartouche of Ambition. This one's 2 and a black for an enchantment or a cartouche, enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Ambition enters the battlefield, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has Lifelink. A single -1/-1 counter isn't really something to write home about. This one doesn't replace itself, and 3 mana for a -1/-1 counter, well, it doesn't sound great. Getting lifelink on a creature might be a boost, but it's also not exactly a game winner. It's like a game staller. Maybe it gets you some inevitability over time, but it's not quite like giving something flying like the blue one does. So the black ones I'm a little bit less out on, but still, I think I'd actually play it much more regularly than I'd play most auras. Cartouche of Zeal is up next. It's the red one, single red mana this time around. Enchantment aura Cartouche at common, enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Zeal enters the battlefield, target creature can't block this turn. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has haste. Now this one I really don't care for. It's 1 red mana, but even that's a bit expensive. Obviously we can't go any lower though. It doesn't replace itself. It just gets you a Goblin Heel Cutter effect, and it gives the creature +1/+1 and has haste. So after the turn you play this, every single effect outside of the +1/+1 is gone. With Cartouche of Knowledge, you've drawn that card, plus the creature has flying, which is still relevant. Lifelink will still be relevant for the black one. That counter will stick around. This one is just gone the turn after you play it. So unless you win off of Cartouche of Zeal, I'm nowhere near as happy with this one as I am with the other 4. The final cartouche today was the green one, Cartouche of Strength. 2 and a green for an enchantment or a cartouche at common. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Strength enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight target creature an opponent controls. And of course, that enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has, in this case, trample. This is just Hunt the Weak, but 1 mana cheaper. This one is huge. This one's crazy. This one's removal. Yeah, this one seems really, really good. And now, it's green, getting a super good card. So, my feelings on green getting all the powerful cards lately. But this just seems really, really good. And at common, at least multiple people are going to get them. Every green deck at the table might have one, so that'll be nice at least. So Cartouche of Strength looking really good. Now we didn't just get the cartouches today, we got their friends, the Trials at Uncommon. Up first is Trial of Solidarity. This is the white one. Why we got the white cartouche and the blue Trial the other day, I have no idea. Really bothers me from a balance of the universe kind of perspective. Anyways, the white Trial of Solidarity, is 2 and a white for an enchantment at Uncommon. When Trial of Solidarity enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +2/+1 and gain Vigilance until end of turn. When a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Solidarity to its owner's hand. Yeah, this is interesting. It's basically Inspired Charge plus Vigilance, and then maybe you can recur it, but that's not how Inspired Charge works. Inspired Charge, the +2/+1 effect is something you cast and win the game. It's not something that you cast and do some damage, and then, I don't know, maybe a few turns later do it again. That's not how these types of deck works. So this one I'm not super stoked on. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see how the rest of the set looks like. But I would really treat this one as like just a sorcery speed effect, and I wouldn't really go deep on recurring it at all. Trial of Ambition, on the other hand, the black one, is something you might want to recur. It's 1 and a black for an enchantment at Uncommon. When Trial of Ambition enters the battlefield, target opponent sacrifices a creature. And then, of course, you return it to your hand when you play a cartouche, or when a cartouche enters the battlefield specifically. This one looks really good. It's a 2 mana sorcery speed edict effect. It's totally fine. Now, edicts aren't the best because, of course, your opponent is choosing what happens, and we'll see this again today, in fact. Your opponent choosing things is not good. They're going to choose the worst option for you. However, the best way to use an edict effect is really early in the game. They play a 3-drop, it's their only creature on the board, you snap this off. You kill the 3-drop, and you're totally fine with it. Then if you can recur this a little bit later, maybe you get to pick something else off, but it will get much less good later in the game as the board gets gummier. Your opponent's going to have a 1/1 to throw away, so keep that in mind, but this one looks really decent. Trial of Zeal, the red one, also looks quite decent. 2 and a red for an enchantment. When Trial of Zeal enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. And then, of course, return it to your hand if you play a cartouche. 3 mana for a bolt that I might get to recur is cool. This one looks really good. I'm, in fact, really interested to see if any of these make standard. That would be really cool. Some sort of cartouche trial control deck. Throw in some Felidar Sovereigns and flicker the trials so you don't even have to play a cartouche to get the effect. I could see some stuff going on here. It kind of makes me want to brew, and I'm not a brewer. The final trial, the green one, Trial of Strength, is 2 and a green for an enchantment and uncommon. When Trial of Strength enters the battlefield, create a 4/2 green beast creature token, and then blah blah blah, usual trial rigmarole. This one's probably the least impactful, the least, super amazing looking, maybe tied with the white one. Getting a 4/2, which is an Alpine Grizzly from Khans of Tarkir, is fine. That's a fine creature. It dies to basically everything, but it's still fine. And if you can somehow, repeatedly recur this, a bunch of 4/2s is great, but, this one's kind of the most basic and the one that I'm not as excited about. At its base, it is just an Alpine Grizzly, which is not the worst creature ever, but, I've seen better trials. Our final uncommon for the day is Watchers of the Dead. Watchers of the Dead is 2 generic mana for an artifact creature cat at uncommon. It's 2/2, so it's 2/2 for 2. And you exile Watchers of the Dead as a cost. Each opponent chooses 2 cards in his or her graveyard and exiles the rest. Again, like Scarab Feast, this is way more sideboardy and constructed-y focused. Yes, even in a graveyard set, I wouldn't really recommend getting too excited about graveyard hate. As I said with Scarab Feast, it's much similar to a counterspell than it is removal, if you kind of get the analogy there. You're going to have to require really specific timing and really specific stuff to really get somebody with this. Your opponent has a lot more control over their embalming and their aftermathing and etc. So I'm not super into the idea of main decking Graveyard Hate, even in this set so far from what we've seen. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll have to see. But constructed, obviously this has some implications. Moving on to the rares, we got a whole bunch of split cards. Many of them people would probably question why they're rare, which makes me think they're actually significantly more powerful than people are giving them credit for. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Insult to Injury is the first one. Insult is 2 and a red for a sorcery at rare. Damage can't be prevented this turn, period. If a source you control would deal damage this turn, it deals double that damage instead. Injury is a sorcery as well for 2 and a red. With Aftermath, Injury deals 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. Now, of course, if you cast this all as one, so you pay 2 and a red, play Insult, put it into the graveyard, pay 2 and a red, play Injury, you're going to deal 4 to a creature and 4 to the opponent. This is another card that I'm totally going to lose to, but I'll always be a little bit reticent to play. It looks really awesome in like some janky formats like Commander, giving my team double strike plus my burn spells and anything else that I do, any other pingers that I have do too, seems awesome. A little burn spell tacked onto it's really cool. I'm gonna lose to this card real bad. Will I play it? I'm not sure yet. I'll have to see more of the set. Rags to Riches is our next split card. Rags is 2 black for a sorcery at rare. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Riches is 5 blue for a sorcery with Aftermath. Each opponent chooses a creature he or she controls. You gain control of those creatures. Rags is an effect we've seen a million times over, and it's just never really that good in Limited. It's far better in Constructed. Far better. The other ability, it's Mind Control, but it's Mind Control for 7 that your opponent gets to pick for you. That is real bad. This is the rare that I'm never going to want to see. I'm never going to want to open in this pack because I'm going to consider it a wasted pack, a wasted rare slot. That Riches card. Oh, maybe if you're in like a 5-person Commander game, it could be okay. But boy, that's a bad card. 2 more split cards today. We have Cut to Ribbons. Cut is 1 and a red for a sorcery at rare. Cut deals 4 damage to target creature. Very strange rare, yes, but we'll talk about this in a second. Ribbons is X black for a sorcery. Aftermath, each opponent loses X life. We've seen more solid removal here. 4 damage to a creature for 2, even at sorcery speed, is totally fine. I'm liking what I'm seeing in the set. I'm seeing a lot of threat removal options. Castaway, cut, or not castaway, cast out. It sucks that cuts at rare, but I'm seeing removal, and it's making me less terrified of the green stuff. Ribbons is a cool little finisher as well, but frankly, I think you'll play cut, even if you don't end up in black in your draft. The final split card for today, the final rare for today, is Mouth to Feed. Mouth is 2 and a green for a sorcery at rare. Create a 3/3 green hippo creature token. Feed is 3 and a green for a sorcery with Aftermath. Draw a card for each creature you control with power 3 or greater. Now this is kind of, along with cut, a real example of why is this rare? It's a vanilla 3/3 for 3. At rare, that's a common card. Sometimes it sneaks into uncommon, but that's a common card. So why is this rare? I think it's because the power of having a second card attached to it is huge. You're virtually drawing a second card. You're not playing a vanilla 3/3 for 3. You're playing a 3/3 for 3 that draws a card, and that card just happens to say, draw a card for each creature you control with power 3 or greater. You draw a very specific card of it. And that's pretty huge. These cards are basically cantripping every single time. They're giving a card into your hand, a card that is even better because it doesn't count towards your hand limit if that's a concern. Yes, it can be hated out by things like Scarab Feast, but I don't think that's a huge deal. So I'm not too upset with these at rare when you start to think about it that way and you start to realize that these cards are drawing cards. Cut deals 4 damage to target creature and draws a card called Ribbons. It's a pretty good card. It's a pretty rare card. Anyways, I'm super excited to play with these split cards. I think they're going to be significantly more powerful than anybody thinks, and they're going to realize why they need to be rare for limited purposes especially. Into the home stretch, we got a few mythics today. Oddly, no god, which is a little bit strange. The first mythic we got is not one that I'm excited about in any way, shape, or form. Combat Celebrant. Combat Celebrant is 2 and a red for a creature human warrior at mythic. It's a 4/1. If Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control. It doesn't untap itself. And after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. My guess here is that the words an additional combat phase basically instantly requires mythic because boy, this thing feels weak. It's a 4/1. It's like Lightning Runner, but it doesn't even have an ability. It doesn't have double strike. It doesn't even have first strike. It doesn't have trample. It doesn't even have haste. It doesn't have anything going on for it. So you are almost definitely just going to throw this creature away when you attack. Now maybe, it does only cost 3, whereas Lightning Runner cost 5, so it hurt a lot more to lose a Lightning Runner than it does to lose a Combat Celebrant. But boy, I'm just not excited to play this card. I don't think the extra combat phases ever really go off in Limited. I'll keep an eye on it, but if I open it, I think I might pass it. As Foretold is our second mythic today. As Foretold is 2 and a blue for an enchantment at mythic. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. So, I read this card, and I wrote a couple of notes about what I was going to say here. I was going to tell you how this card's really bad, and it's nowhere near as good as you ever would hope it would be. And then I saw the words or less. This card's amazing. That drastically changed my opinion of this card. Pretty rapidly, you're going to be getting whatever spell you want for free in Limited. Turn 4, you're going to get a free 1-drop. Turn 5, you're going to get a free 2-drop, which is going to be relevant-ish on turn 5 in Limited. And then 3, 4, 5-drop, and you are gold after that. You're getting a free spell every turn. Boy, this card's real good. I want to see some people do some janky stuff with this in every format they can. This card looks fun. I really want to open it. 2 little words utterly changed how this card works. So good. The final mythic is the first Planeswalker that we've gotten, and people are excited about it too. Gideon of the Trials. Gideon of the Trials is 1 white for a Planeswalker Gideon at mythic, starting at 3 loyalty. It has a +1 ability. Until your next turn, prevent all damage target permanent would deal. Any permanent. Yours doesn't make any sense, but you could do it. Your opponent's most likely. Their lands. Who knows? Any permanent. 0. Until end of turn, Gideon of the Trials becomes a 4/4 human soldier creature with indestructible that's still a Planeswalker. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. Pretty typical Gideon ability. His quote-unquote ultimate is also 0, so Gideon actually never loses loyalty counters for abilities here. His ultimate 0 is you get an emblem with, as long as you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you can't lose the game. And your opponents can't win the game. People are freaking out about this. You can't lose and your opponents can't win. How will you ever beat somebody who has a Gideon in their Limited deck? You kill Gideon. You attack him with your creatures until he is dead. Then your opponent falls next. Super powerful though. Really cool ultimate. I've already heard talks of Gideon tribal decks. Obviously, if you have, a playset of, 2, 3 Gideons, depending on the format, it might be harder for you to die. But from a limited perspective, this isn't that bad outside of it just being a pretty decent and very cheap Planeswalker. Gideon of the Trials looks really powerful. Hoping that I get my hands on him, maybe in my sealed league at the store. That would be real nice. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up. Pretty long video. We had less cards today, but there was a lot to talk about on them. Anyways, let me know what your favorite cartouche was, what your favorite trial is, what you think of Gideon. Did you misread As Foretold the same way that I did? Also, I'm wondering if there's not going to be a Nicol Bolas in this set. As Foretold kind of shows Nicol Bolas starting to appear in the clouds, and we actually know from today's Magic story that Nicol Bolas is not on the plane of Amonkhet when the Gatewatch arrives. I could see Nicol Bolas not being in until Hour of Devastation. And boy, that would piss people off because they want to play Dark Intimations, but I think it would be great. Anyways, let me know what you think of today's spoilers in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's Leek, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at facebook.com/manaleek, twitch.tv/manaleek, and patreon.com/themanaleek. As always, if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.